Good afternoon. Welcome back. It is Sunday, December 3rd, 2023. We are quickly closing in on the end of this series, but we do have a few legends' birthdays today to talk about and one event. So let's go ahead and go there. In 2017, once again down in Pensacola, Florida, at the Snowball Derby, Kyle Busch wins that race on this date. Of course, like we talked about yesterday, this race tends to bring out in more recent years a lot of guys from the top three series of NASCAR to go down and invade that super late model event. In the past, it was always kind of not run in conjunction with ASA Artco in the Southeast Series, but it was more in line with those were going to be the drivers that were going down and dominating that event. So anyway, let's get to our birthdays. Our first birthday, I do have a couple cards for this gentleman, but I could not find them. I thought they were in one box. They were not. But he does have cards in 1995 Images and in the 1995 Finish Line Super Truck Series set. So you have to go find those and check those out. Born on this day in 1938, off-roading legend Walker Evans. So yes, Walker did make a small foray into the NASCAR world in the early days of the Truck Series. Really wasn't that competitive. But again, I think it was a thing where maybe his sponsors, his manufacturers said, hey, let's go do this for a little while, and you can call it a day. So our next birthday, born on this date in 1951, has a few IndyCar championships, has 4 Indianapolis 500 victories, and was a qualifying machine. The original Rocket, before Ryan Newman became the Rocket Man, this would be Rick Mears. So there's the Al Unser Sr.'s car back there behind him, but Rick carried Pennzoil colors for a number of years, as well as the Marlboro branding during his time in the IndyCar series. Rick had a horrible crash in 1984 at San Air Speedway during practice. Learned a lot more about it in the book that I read, the Steve Olvey book, but did some horrible damage to his feet because in the mid 80s, the driver's feet actually sat in front of the front axle lines. So when a car would hit the wall head on, the driver's feet sadly would get crushed in the mayhem, and that's literally what happened with Rick. This card, by the way, is a preview card of the 1995 Images set. I believe these were in the... I can't remember what set those were released in. It's kind of cool. The Images set's pretty nice, but it's also a little distracting because there's a lot of gloss to it. But Rick's injuries in 1986 limited him to oval, or 1985 limited him to ovals only. And pretty much moving forward, he was only running ovals. I think he did run some road courses a little bit later on, but he was never the same Rick Mears, both on ovals and on road courses. Similar thing happened, they talked about in the book, with Pancho Carter, where he had some foot and leg injuries and couldn't run the road courses anymore. So that's just one of the dangers of the time of the IndyCar series, was feet and leg injuries. You can go back and there's just a wide array of drivers getting hurt because the cars were hitting, with the angle of the cars hitting the wall, and they redesigned the cars, and leg injuries almost completely fell off the map at that point. So our second driver is a NASCAR Hall of Famer, 3-time Daytona 500 winner, has a championship, also has a son and a brother in the Hall of Fame. That would be Mr. Bobby Allison. So I've got these cards done as best I can in the chronological order of Bobby's career. A couple of them may be out of order because I couldn't tell if this was from the 60s, late 60s, early 70s, because it really doesn't show any cars other than a couple of those in the background, and only, people that actually have a knowledge of car years would be able to tell what those were. But this looks like a early 70s, perhaps late 60s. And now we're getting into stuff that I can identify. Early 70s, Coca-Cola. He would have been with Junior Johnson during that time, during that number 12 red and gold Chevy days. There's a good look at Bobby winning. And I think, again, it's during that or close to that era. And then this, I can tell by that hood, that's a Bud Moore car. So this would have been 78, 79, 80-ish era, as well as this one. You can see the patches there on the uniform are very similar, even though the uniforms are different. But Bobby ran during the 70s for Roger Penske, drove for himself in a Matador. Like I say, got his first Daytona 500 win for Bud Moore in 78. Ran for him for another year or two. Then he moved on to the DieGuard team, at first with the Gatorade sponsorship in 1982, which he won the Daytona 500 for them right out of the box with Bumpergate. You guys have to look that one up. And then in 1983, they switched from number 88 to 22 with DieGuard and got Miller High Life. Ran Miller High Life in 83 and 84, but in 83 he won his first and only Cup Series championship, besting Darrell Waltrip. 85, 86, 87, he was sponsored. Miller changed their branding to Miller American. Of course, you see still has High Life on the hat. But 85, he was still with DieGuard till mid-season after a messy split. He took the Miller sponsorship to his own team for the end of 85. Then he went to Stavola's with this same paint scheme in 85 and 86 and 87. 88, Miller High Life came back with their gold branding. And you see he has that iconic gold uniform. But the day before the 88 Daytona 500, he'd win his final Busch Series race, the Goodies 300. And we've seen this card earlier on the Judy Allison episode with them celebrating in Victory Lane. And of course, 1988 Daytona 500, Bobby wins. And there you see Davy's arm in the picture pouring a beer on Bobby in Victory Lane. Later in 88, Bobby would have a career-ending injury. He would sit out the 89 season. I believe he was still under contract from Stavola at that point. 1990, he started his own team. Started with Mike Alexander, ended up with Strickland finishing the year in the number 12 Ray Bestis Buicks. They added a little more color to their cars in 91, 92. By the end of the 92 season, Strickland was out, Jimmy Spencer was in. Then you come to the 93 season, they had 1 year with Meineke colors. Then in 94, they didn't have any sponsorship till near the end of the season, where they picked up straight arrow mane and tail. Derek Cope drove that car. Then they continued. Then they had a good season 95 with the mane and tail folks. 96, mane and tail bailed out halfway through in exchange for another company. And then pretty much after 96, the team folded. But we got a few cars here we'll talk about. There's that Matador we spoke of, Coca-Cola Matador. I don't know if that's a Penske or the one that Bobby drove for his own team. That might be the Penske Matador, but then they put the DieGuard uniform right there. There's the unsponsored car that Bobby owned in the early part of 94. Chuck Bounds started the year, but got injured midway. Tim Steele drove for a few races. Then Derek Cope took over, as we mentioned. And the sponsor I didn't want to mention, again, there's certain keywords that set off demonetization on YouTube, so we try to avoid that as best we can. But I'm going to shout out to Logan Ward here. This is the kind of card that you need in your sophomore slabs, but that is a furniture company. I don't think there's another picture of it, but that would be the last car that would come out of the Bobby Allison stables. They couldn't pick up a sponsor for 97, so sadly Bobby just had to shut the team down. And you look at different eras, in 1997 was kind of a time where that was, you're starting to get, you obviously had corporate involvement, but it was beginning to be the start of the multi-car teams. At that point, Rick Hendrick was truly the only multi-car team. 97, Childress came in as a multi-car team. Roush had been a multi-car team a little bit. They did it in 92, 93. Then I guess they had been since 92 because Musgrave had been there in 94. So Roush was just starting to really accept the multi-car, multi-team umbrella. And then 98, 99 is when it really started to take off. Because if you didn't have a second car, you were going to get left behind. But anyway, that's been birthdays and events for this Sunday, December 3rd. As always, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks again, as always, for watching, and we will see you tomorrow.